You probably never heard of the name Lyman Bostock before. And don't worry, you're probably not the only one. But for those people that are familiar with the name, they remember what a hell of a baseball player he was and what a hell of a man he was. Unfortunately, on this date, 42 years ago, his life was cut down tragically. Now, Lyman Bostock's story is important to me for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm a huge baseball fan and have always been that way, as long as I can remember. And number two, I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana, and that's where Lyman met his tragic end. But before we get to that fateful day over 42 years ago, let's rewind time and take a look at the person and the player that Lyman Bostock was. Lyman Bostock was born in Birmingham, Alabama on November 22nd, 1950. When he was 4 years old, his mother moved him to the city of Gary, Indiana. The sport of baseball would take Lyman to different places around the country, but he never lost his love for the city of Gary, Indiana. Lyman fell in love with baseball as a youth and developed his skills even more during his high school years. Lyman attended California State University at Northridge and hit .344 as a junior and .296 as a senior. He was selected by the Minnesota Twins in the 26th round of the 1972 amateur baseball draft. Lyman spent 2 years in the minor leagues before being called up to the Minnesota Twins. In his first full year, he finished third in batting that year. So yeah, it was evident that Lyman was a force on the baseball field to be reckoned with. In 1977, Lyman signed a 6-year contract with the California Angels worth $2.3 million. Now, he didn't get off to a good start that year, and he was so frustrated he actually wanted to give back a portion of his salary to the Angels, which they refused. So he donated part of his salary to a church anyway. Lyman kept at it and was able to end the year batting .296. And this is where the story takes the horrible turn. People familiar with the Midwest would recognize that Gary, Indiana is maybe a 20-25 minute drive from Chicago. So it was on this September day in 1978 that Lyman had an afternoon game with the Chicago White Sox. Whenever Lyman had a game in Chicago, he would often stop in Gary to visit friends and relatives after the game was over. On that fateful night, Lyman decided to have dinner with an uncle of his and some childhood friends he hadn't seen in years. One of Lyman's childhood friends actually had a sister that Lyman had just met. The sister needed a ride, so Lyman, his uncle, his childhood friend, and his childhood friend's sister all piled into Lyman's uncle's car. Now, unbeknownst to everybody in the car, Lyman's childhood friend's sister had an estranged husband who often stalked her, and this night was no different. The man's name was Leonard Smith, and he followed Lyman and his uncle's car, catching up to them at a light on 5th and Jackson Street in Gary. Believing that Lyman was having an affair with his wife, he pulled out a shotgun and shot into the vehicle Lyman was in, striking him in the temple. It's been 42 years since Lyman Bostock was killed on 5th and Jackson in Gary, Indiana, and he is continually missed by his family, friends, and teammates. What will have happened in his career had he lived longer? Could he have been a Hall of Fame player? Maybe. How many kids would he have had? Nobody knows. But we do know is that he didn't deserve to be taken that day. So with that being said, rest in peace, Lyman Bostock, and we haven't forgotten you.